Good morning, Austin.
What's up, guys? Good morning.
How is your South by going? Great. Very low energy this morning after 3 full days at this amazing conference. You are here. Welcome to From Goals to Touchdowns, where we're going to talk about all things marketing with these two amazing CMOs. Tania Moreno is the CMO of AC Milan. Any Milan fans in the crowd? And before, she's, by the way, the only female CMO in Italian soccer league also. And she comes from the Redbird side. She was in the strategic marketing division of Redbird Capital Partner, and then she worked as the senior VP of marketing of Arizona Coyotes or NHL. She oversaw brand marketing and digital efforts, and then she also worked at CBS Sports, so all of that sports background. But prior to that, she worked with some of the best companies in the United States, from food sector to retail. And I'm going to list some of them, and I think you're going to freak out when I say PetSmart, Burger King, Mattel, where she worked with Barbie. And I know this is a sports panel, but I believe we should briefly talk about your past at Barbie, because it's kind of the topic of the last 24 hours. And she's not a stranger to sports or to AC Milan. She grew up with a fan father who was an AC Milan fan, and in her household, she was watching the game at home on different platforms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And James, Ruth, is a reformed investment banker. I really love that you call yourself a reformed investment banker. He spent the last decade building progressive football brands, and that means not only global football, also the American football. During his 7 years at MLS, he actually created partnerships with Heineken, Tag Heuer, Adidas, Target, Audi, and led MLS to new territories in gaming and gambling. In 2020, he joined the leadership team at Austin FC. ATX. And we were very lucky to experience the game at Q2 Stadium. I think it was a wonderful opportunity to get to know your team that you built. The team has the longest MLS streak of selling out stadiums, like 24,000 people fill that stadium every home game. That's an amazing achievement. And we really love the atmosphere and what you've done there. And in 2023, we lost him to NFL. He's now working for the other side.
I didn't die. I just went to the NFL. Yeah.
And, you know, the Super Bowl champions, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are very lucky to have him. And I think when I was asking you about when sports came into your life, you know, everybody has a story, like an origin story. And you said 2010 World Cup in New York. Living that experience. Can you?
Yeah. So I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I always tell people there's only one type of football in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I grew up with the Huskers, and have been a long-time suffering fan for the last 30 years. But when I moved to New York in 2009, 2010, I was still in investment banking, and I was plying my trade, and I was young and trying to figure out what the world is about and all that sort of stuff. And it was at that time that the 2010 World Cup was happening. And like I said, I didn't, I knew the game, right? I knew the game of soccer, but I didn't have a lot of acculturation with it. And just seeing the city of New York turn over and, really kind of change colors based on that game. And, the 2010 World Cup was nowhere near New York, right? But the city became a conduit for fandom of the game. And it really, at that point, it just struck me how there is something different about global football and its ability to be a connective device, particularly in an international town like New York, where everybody was wearing their own colors, flying their own flag. And I still remember, a great moment from American soccer history of, there was a game against Algeria in the final game of the group stage. We had to win to go through. And I snuck out in the middle of the day from my banking job, and I went to a bar down the street. And I come to find out that everybody had snuck out in the middle of the day. And experiencing that moment of Landon Donovan, scoring a goal at the last minute to win that game. And that thing that's special about sport where everybody is having the collective same feeling at the same time, no matter what your background is, where you're from. It was such a catalyst moment for me to say, like, I want more of this. I want to satiate this feeling and be part of trying to develop this feeling in different places and spaces.
And I don't know if anybody cares, 2010 was why I became a sports journalist. I was a CNN breaking news correspondent in Argentina, suffering from reporting, hard news. And Maradona became the DT of Argentinian national team. Messi was there, and I told my boss, like, I want to cover this. Let me do these stories. And they say, girls don't make good sports reporters. And here we are today.
Yeah.
So I think girls can do anything. Thank you, soccer, for bringing us to this stage. Thank you, World Cup. Okay, so let's start by asking both of you, how are you leveraging these two incredible backgrounds in marketing to today, your jobs today, to football and football?
Yeah, I mean, I can go pretty quickly. I think no matter what industry you're working in, there's some principles that all still apply, like understanding your consumer base, your customer base, the product that you're trying to sell, and how you do that emotionally so you don't come across as just, buy our stuff, come to our matches. And so some of those practices, no matter if you work in retail and sports and banking probably as well, like you take some of those practices with you. So I think those skills are interchangeable no matter what industry you work in.
Yeah, I think for me, just more specifically on the, going from the MLS world to NFL, I found my MLS experience to be hugely complementary to the NFL because I think in a lot of ways, MLS and NFL are very yin and yang. I think anybody that's been part of Austin FC or a lot of the work at the league office, MLS has been fantastic about building, clubs and brands with a lot of depth and fan connection. And NFL has that, but it's done it in a very different way. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of take some of that sensibility and apply it to the NFL, which, has been traditionally all about the power of the shield and rules and the no fun league. And that sometimes can limit your ability to be able to connect with audiences. So it's been interesting to have both of those experiences and then apply them at the league office or with the Bucs and the NFL at this point.
And how do you balance maintaining that consistency in the brand identity, but also adapting to unique demands of each platform that you're using to market your brand? Because right now, obviously, television is one thing, print media is one thing, but we have so many social platforms that have different algorithms, different audiences and demographics.
Yeah, I mean, we have, AC Milan is a fortunate brand in the sense that we have over 500 million fans across the globe. And you guys have to remember that next year will be 125 years old. We have the second most Champions League wins, just behind Real Madrid. And we've had players from all over the globe play for us and be able to win the hearts and minds of fans for a really, really long time. So I think we're starting from just a completely different base from, let's say, something like MLS. And so we have to be really cognizant of having some pretty strict brand guidelines, brand identities, values that we live throughout our content, no matter what platform we're in. But then we do customize based on the platform. So I'll give you an example. In China, they don't use Facebook and Instagram. They have their own social platforms. So in Weibo, our content is cutesy. It's animated, it's cartoony. If we were to put that, and it does really, really well, so well that when we won the Scudetto, which is the Italian championship last season, or 2 seasons ago, wow, time flies, fans in China spent $300,000 of their own money to brand a skyscraper on their own. So it's like we have avid fan base. But if we were to put that content and the way that we communicate to that fan base on LinkedIn, you would say, like, AC Milan's not silly or goofy or animated. Like, I don't really understand. So paying attention some of those, to all of the cultural nuances is really important. For example, like in the US, we have Christian Pulisic, who is an American player. We also have Yunus Musa, and so we can leverage him where we can without overdoing it, because the culture in the US is, he's really well known, recognizable. He's one of the faces of the men's national team. So we're able to adapt in specific ways like that.
Yeah, I think what you talked about there in terms of vision and kind of consistency from that perspective, I think in each of my stops, whether it's the league office for MLS or Austin FC or the Bucks now, like the focus on having a mission and executing against that consistently, and then figuring out how your mission then applies to these different channels is really the difference maker. Mm-hmm. I think with everybody being so psyched out about, how are we going to be unique on TikTok, or how are we going to take and tackle any sort of new platform, really it can be a trap sometimes, right? Because if you just focus on what's going on that platform, you miss the opportunity for you to bring something unique and to have a point of view. And I think, especially in this day and age, like fans, they want you to have a point of view. That's what makes you a fan of that particular team. And I think so often sports is so focused on how do we, be progressive and all this sort of stuff, but progressive how? Like progressive in the tech, progressive in the platform, or progressive in your point of view, right? And I think trying to continue to focus on that, executing that in new and different ways is so fundamentally important to be able to win on those sorts of platforms and actually provide something that's different, right?
You meet your audience where they are.
Yeah.
You find them where they are instead of taking something to where you want to go. Exactly. Because you're not going to have that, opportunity. And I think sometimes, leagues and teams are using big names to bring a lot of attention to, I'm not talking about AC Milan example, but for MLS, for example, Messi's arrival was an incredible marketing opportunity to bring world's eyeballs to the league that is very young and growing. And we were talking about it, like that is such a smart way of market a league by bringing a famous player, or perhaps everybody this year watching the NFL together with Swifties and Taylor Swift, and like how can you incorporate someone that perhaps wasn't ever part of sports, but through her connection to her boyfriend, new audiences arrived to NFL. And I'm sure these are all different ways of looking at the product, like you mentioned. Let's talk about markets, because I think both of you are looking at growing your audiences in different markets. For AC Milan, what are those markets? And I think it's probably clearly United States and the rest of the world that you can mention. And then let's see where.
Yeah, I think it's really fun because we're trying to accomplish the same thing in just different territories. So clearly, Italy is a market of importance to us because we're an Italian football club. But the two other markets that are particularly interesting for us in terms of growth is the U.S. and then the Middle East. In the Middle East, in particular, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And so, for many different reasons. So, the U.S. is really important to us, and I guess the way that we think about it is in two different landscapes. We take a look at the landscape and the economics of the market that we could potentially be interested in, and then uniquely enough, the relationships that we have play into the strategy of what markets we go into, and I can explain a bit. So in terms of the landscape and the economics, we look at, where is soccer? Now I'm so confused between football and soccer. Because I used to call it soccer, and then, that was the whole thing in Europe. Where is soccer growing the quickest in terms of, where are you seeing significant increases in viewership, in merch sales, in venue attendance? What markets are actually contributing to the growth of it in terms of significantly investing in the infrastructure, in youth programs? Those elements are important. Clearly just population size, right? The US is a massive market, and spending power. Spending power not only from consumers, but also corporations. The B2B side is super important when picking markets for us. And then the relationship side, which is a little bit unique to us. So about close to 2 years ago, Redbird Capital Partners, a private equity fund based in the US, acquired the company. And in their portfolio of companies, you've got the Yes Network, you have the XFL turned UFL, you have Fenway Sports Group. Gosh, what else do they have? They're investors in Skydance, and Everpass, a sponsor of this piece. They've got, what else? Spring Hill Company, which is a content and production company, with the shop being probably the most famous program that they have. And so for us, it's, if we have these strong relationships in the US, how do we just leverage those to grow quicker? So for example, all of our VOD and shows from Milan TV are aired on the Yes Network. So wherever you can get the Yes Network, now you can get access to our shows for free. So just having those connections, like the foot in the door, it gives us a competitive advantage. And then we also take a look at the relationships that we have with our sponsors. So Emirates is a massive brand. Not only do they have a ton of money, but they have a lot of connections. So we think about, okay, how do they open up the UAE to us in the Middle East from an investment standpoint, but also from a customer growth perspective. So Emirates has thousands of flights a day. They air our content on their flights. We recently got them to sell our jerseys in all of their lounges. So if we have these massive partners, we're not a company that looks at, okay, they're giving us millions of dollars worth of sponsorship and now we have to execute on a contract. We're trying to think, how do we leverage their brand equity and their customers and their pockets to help us grow as well?
Yeah, on the Buccaneers side, it's a little bit different because we've got Mother NFL helping us in terms of how we're thinking about international expansion. And so the Bucs have focused and have exclusive rights alongside a couple other teams to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And that process to go and bid on that particular territory was built up on, the ownership group, the Glazers, believing that Germany was an appropriate opportunity. So it's a little bit different because when we go into international markets versus AC Milan, it's really the Bucs and the NFL going together, which is helpful because it means we can focus. It also means it's a little bit more segmented. We have to be a little bit more methodical about where we go. And I think for the first time, the Bucs are really, ambitioning to put down roots and really focus on Germany in a way that we haven't before. Even though we played the first game on German soil in 2022, we're now really turning the page and say, okay, it's got to be more than playing games, right? And we can only guarantee, we can't guarantee even that we're going to play a game in Germany every couple of years. So how are we building a strategy that goes beyond that? And I think a big thing for us is, how are we putting boots on the ground for the game, right? How are we creating consistent opportunities? Because even if we did play a game every year, okay, that's one opportunity for 70,000 people that are going through the stands, but that's not necessarily going to lead to long-term connectivity. And it's actually very analogous to European clubs coming to the States. For a long time, the last decade, the strategy was, let's go get a payday, let's go play a game, let's do a friendly, and then go away. And that pales in comparison to what AC Milan and company are doing now. But it's an interesting thing, just from a soccer perspective, having seen that done in the States for such a long time, and now trying to apply some of those learnings to Germany in terms of how the Bucs brand can grow. It's got to be about sustainability. It's got to be about real partnerships. And how are we making German Bucs fans understand that this isn't a one-time thing where we're actually trying to build for a much longer pathway, right?
I think I have a follow-up question, and maybe others are also curious. Why Germany? Because obviously, in AC Milan example, you're leveraging the Yankee connection, the ownership group. Your ownership group is Manchester United. I would think why they're not leveraging that opportunity and fan group instead. And what's about Germany that makes it an NFL market?
Well,
is it the American
it's
basis?
The beer.
It's the
Is
beer.
it the beer?
It was based
the
purely
F&B
off
revenue
of
potential.
beer consumption sales. That's where they were that's where we're going to go. No, I mean, it's funny. I mean, it's easy to forget, but I mean, Germany has an American football history, right? And these numbers still surprise me, but there's 17 million qualified NFL fans in Germany, in a country of 83. and it's considered the second most popular sport in the country already, which, when I got to the Bucks, that surprised me. So it's a strong base to build on. Obviously, it's one of the biggest economies in Europe, and you have a lot of brands that are domiciled there as well. But it just felt like, in terms of big bets, big opportunities in Europe, a great place to start and then ultimately grow from there.
I didn't realize it. So there was an NFL game this year in Frankfurt, and there is a massive U.S. military base there.
Yeah, 100%.
And so when I went to the game, there's so many people in uniform, and I at first I didn't understand, and then I understood.
And Frankfurt's CEO told me about that. Frankfurt has been always with the bases, like something that was easier to market NFL there.
Yep.
And now that you have 17 million is a huge number of fan base. And is there ways of measuring this, successful campaigns that you can maybe give us a few examples of, like, this is how we measure success in Germany or in US? Is it the numbers? Is it the audience coming back to you? What are those metrics?
I could talk a little bit about our strategy and then how we measure success. So, for example, in the US, our biggest strategy is, first of all, we take a look at the audience, and the soccer audience in the US is a lot younger than in the rest of the world. And so what we're trying to do is we're borrowing brand equity or equity with brands and companies that already have the trust and already have built authentic relationships with this audience, and then kind of tying ourselves to them. So last year, for our fourth kit, we decided to launch it via Rocket League. So you could get a car and race with it with a skin of the fourth kit, which was a massive success. And Rocket League was already really popular. We had the exact demographic that we wanted, super cool. We didn't think we were as cool as Rocket League, and so we could kind of borrow some of that equity and start working off of it. Same thing with Off-White. So clearly Milan is one of the fashion capitals of the world, but streetwear isn't necessarily something that is as popular in Milan as it is in the US or the rest of the world. And so we had a partnership with Off-White that already had the credibility, already had the cool factor, and then by adding our piece of that puzzle, we like to call 1 + 1 = 3, and made that pretty successful. We're also, leveraging fashion, like I spoke about with Off-White. We recently launched a jersey with Pleasures, which are, again, streetwear, has brand equity already, authenticity, and so we're not just pushing football or soccer, we're pushing our brand in some pretty unique and authentic ways. And we're not only, I think a big part of our strategy as well is giving back. We're not coming to the US and just saying, buy our merch, watch our matches. So we have a couple of really interesting partnerships in New York. We have partnered up with a nonprofit called Success Academy Soccer Program, where we're coming and actually giving the opportunity for socioeconomically challenged communities to be able to, first of all, learn the game, learn how to coach, learn the training, the recovery, and then kids are able to go and actually experience this. We have a partnership with UCLA for their sustainability programs so that we can better learn from experts in sustainability in sports to become a better brand and be able to leverage their expertise. And ironically enough, we have a partnership with the University of Texas here.
But before we go into that, because I really want to go into that, but you mentioned fashion, and I think because fashion is such a visual aspect, maybe we can watch this video that shows everything that you just mentioned about the partnerships and the Ford kit, because then we go to UT, because very curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, essentially this video will show you guys just how we move beyond the pitch and how we are able to stay relevant with particular markets and target audiences that isn't necessarily just pushing the game of soccer on them.
Whatever I want, I can have it. I'm exceptional, way above average. Obstacles don't stand a chance against me. Better make other plans. In It doesn't matter when nobody tells you, believe in yourself, power comes from within. I know they counted you out and they left you for dead. It don't matter, you still gonna win. It doesn't matter when nobody tells you, believe in yourself, power comes from within. If they counted you out, it doesn't matter, you're still gonna win. It doesn't matter when nobody tells you, believe in yourself, power comes from within. I know they counted you out and they left you for dead. It don't matter, you still gonna win. It doesn't matter when nobody tells you, believe in yourself, power comes from within. If they counted you out, it doesn't matter, you're still gonna win. It doesn't matter when nobody tells you, believe in yourself, power comes from within. Win, win, win. Yeah, I gotta win. I'm unstoppable, I gotta win. I'm unstoppable, I gotta win. I'm unstoppable, I gotta win. I gotta win.
Win on and off the pitch.
And we have an example of that Ford kit in the room. If anybody wants to see later, we have a model. He can show this amazing outfit. But and AC Milan is not the only team obviously putting efforts on fashion. James, soon after you get to Tampa, there was a campaign that you launched that I thought it was very interesting. Is the creamsicle jersey, which is, NFL is such a macho team or sport, and here we are with pink orange jerseys that you're selling to people. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, so in the sort of lore of NFL, the creamsicle jerseys are kind of one of the most storied sort of throwback jerseys. So, it was worn in a time when maybe the Bucs weren't top tier in terms of what was happening on the field. And they ultimately ended up doing a rebrand and changing in the early 2000s. But in that time, the creamsicle jersey has kind of taken on this extra lore. And so we decided to bring the creamsicles back and celebrate that legacy. And I think the big thing that was really important for us is in doing that, making sure that we're telling a cultural conversation, not just a football conversation. And Tania talked about it in really good depth, but it's so important for us as we think about our brands, particularly as we're trying to think about new audiences, that maybe brands that or fans that are not so acculturated with American football, how are we bringing them into the conversation in other ways while still leveraging what we have available to us? So the creamsicle jersey launch that we did, it included this whole storyline arc of this secret bar called Leroy's, which was in honor of our first ever draft pick, Leroy Selman. And it was this sort of whole kind of like dreamscape sort of thing that we made up. And that, in a lot of ways, was significantly different than what a lot of other NFL teams would do to launch. Typically, if they're going to do a throwback jersey, it's all about playing the highlights and talking about the good old days and all that sort of stuff. And we tried to drive much more of a cultural conversation around it, while still integrating our legends, the Derek Brookses, the Rondé Barbers of the world, Hall of Famers, but getting them integrated in a way that was much more culturally oriented and kind of playing into this whole concept. And I think it's a muscle that's been built really well in global football. It's actually something that I think NFL can learn, particularly, like I said, as they think about new audiences. If I never watched Derek Brooks play football, I can't have any reverence for him if you're going to show highlights in a jersey launch, right? But we still want to build the stature of those guys so we can celebrate our legacy. So trying to position them in something like this creamsicle drop that is much more of a storyline-based thing and a fashion thing felt like the right strategy in what we were doing.
In global football, one of the things that I appreciate a lot for the person who's coming new to the team or to the audience is most of the teams have a museum where you see that legacy, you see like the history of the club, the fashion, like the jerseys across like for the last 100 years. And I think that is how you leverage your history and what you already have culturally to the new audience and be like, oh, look up, this was what you used to have. And I think that's a great way of bringing new people to, and like attach them to your brand rather quickly. Because they want to be part of something that, history is a great thing, but fashion and entertainment and sports is obviously the most effective way of bringing and leveraging the team's opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think the stat that sticks out the most in my head of are we succeeding in growing the fan base in the U.S. is, 21% of our online sales of our merchandise now comes from the U.S., and it used to be single digits. But most importantly, less than half of the jerseys sold in the U.S. are Pulisic. Huh. So if they were 90% Pulisic, I would say it's the Messi effect. But it's actually like we've figured out how to leverage him in the right way, but he's not our sole strategy. He's not our sole execution. Because if he gets hurt or if he decides to go to a different club at some point down the line, have we built it the right way where it's not just reliant on one person?
Yep.
And not trying to be controversial, but next year, if Messi leaves and goes to Saudi, has Inter Milan done the work to be able to leverage Beckham and what they're doing? Like, they have a good story, but if Messi leaves, what happens? Similar to how I think about PSG. Can you think about PSG without Jordan? When that deal runs out and Jordan doesn't renew, this isn't like they won't renew. I'm just, like, as a marketer, I love to think about this.
Yeah.
Does PSG have a strong enough brand without Jordan?
Yeah, it's really relevant. I mean, we experienced it at the Bucs. When I got to the Bucs, everybody was asking me, like, why are you going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Tom Brady just left. Are you crazy? And, for the few years that Tom Brady was there, in a lot of ways, he exceeded the brand. And so it's a really, really challenging trap because it's that sort of instant gratification of, show Tom Brady versus trying to build long-term equity in your brand. And that's the magic thing that all of these teams are going to have to do when they get these marquee players is, okay, great, they're bringing a ton of eyeballs, but how do you start to offload the story to your brand and make sure that you own it? Easier said than done, but it's absolutely something to do, or else you're kind of just renting the player's equity, right? And it's not really a long-term solution.
And I think we can break one of the biggest sports business myths here, like when a player goes to a team, like, when Messi came to, Inter Miami, or when Cristiano Ronaldo was at Juve, with the jersey sales, they'll probably pay his salary off, like something like that kind of misinformation that people like actually spread out when a player goes to a team. It's really not only meaningless, but also, like you said, it's like the one and done things are never really long-term success stories. And I did cut you off with the AI and UT collaboration you were mentioning. I just didn't want us to miss out on a little bit of actually talking about new technologies and perhaps enter, because you and I were talking about it recently when I asked you about what do you think about NFTs and what do you think about this and you said it doesn't matter if you don't know your audience. But before we go into that, how are you, I think in addition to psychedelics, AI was the biggest topic at South by Southwest this year. I think I saw more psychedelic and AI panels this year. And so I want to know, how are you leveraging this new trend to...
the psychedelic trend or the AI trend?
Well, that would be very interesting, how to cure sports injuries with psychedelics. We will talk about this in the future, I'm sure. But no, let's talk about AI, or whether or not you're using it and how you're using it. Is it working? Is it something that you're looking into, and perhaps the UT collaboration?
Yeah, we are. We're using it in several ways. The way that we like to look at it is what business problem are we trying to solve, and how can we use technology to help us solve it in a more efficient way. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Sadly enough, racism is still rampant in the world of football, and so we use AI to comb through our social media comments, looking for hate speech, deleting it, and blocking those users. No need for you to follow us, no need for you to ever comment again. And so where it would take hours and hours and be really expensive to hire people to manually do that, we're leveraging AI to do it pretty quickly on our channels. We're also leveraging it to personalize content. So let's say you're a Pulisic fan and you look at the weather, it's going to be raining for the next couple of weeks, like it has been in Milan, and you come to our website or app to just check out the standings or current news. Your experience may be tailored to have a bit more Pulisic content, and then we may feed you an AC Milan umbrella, a rain jacket, things like that. So that's been pretty interesting to test and really well received. And then we've started testing using AR in our stadium. So we have like a Snapchat style filter. So for our fourth kit, when fans went to the stadium, they were able to see themselves with either the light version or the dark version on the video board, to just be able to have a little bit of fun with that. And then I think, again, just this is really practical use for us. So what is unique to our club that isn't necessarily the case in any US sport, we own all of our archived content. Over 100 years worth of content that is sitting in like VHS tapes. We calculated that it would take us 3 years working 12 hours a day, every day, to be able to tag and bring that to the digital world, digital life. So we're looking at AI companies and technology to see if their facial recognition of Paolo Maldini, what his face looks like and his jersey and his number, to be able to quickly tag, okay, this was a match and this is where he played, so that when we go to create the top 10 highlights of Paolo Maldini to put on YouTube to monetize it, we can do that rather quickly. So that's just a practical way. How are we measuring the success? I mean, it's efficiency.
Yeah.
For now, there's a bit of engagement, which is really nice, but we're not going all in on engagement. Like, engagement's fantastic. Would love to have some sort of virtual world where you land in the middle of San Siro and it looks like you're a player. But we have the notion of responsible football. For the first time last season, we were profitable in 125 years, which is bananas.
Big deal for soccer.
So I love the technology. Our stance is just let's use it for efficiencies and test like some fun engagement elements. But we'd rather,
Yeah.
How about NFL?
Yeah, talking about all the AI stuff, you're right. I mean, it's psychedelics and AI. I can't wait to get to the psychedelics portion of this chat. But, I think it can be a trap when stuff is so in vogue, because so often people can be racking their brains about how do we implement this without actually understanding what is the need, like what you talked about.
Yeah.
And so I think the big opportunity for us on the AI front is how do we continue to personalize our fan journeys, right? If we know that you're a particular fan of Mike Evans or Baker Mayfield, great. Let's make sure that we're using AI to, in our iterative emails and all of that sort of stuff, be pushing it to you to drive better engagement, get you to do the next action that we want you to do and all that sort of stuff. So that, from a fan perspective and where fans are really feeling it, that's going to be the biggest thing. And again, though, it is a trap if you're not careful, because it doesn't mean just because you're a Mike Evans fan that we need to be sending you Mike Evans content all the time, anytime. So to measure that and make sure that we're not going overboard at the same time is key. But then beyond that, all the stuff in terms of efficiency, photo tagging, like our photographer team is very thankful for the fact that AI is jumping in and tagging all of the Baker Mayfield photos that we've been doing for the last 10 years, or a couple years for Baker, 10 for Mike Evans. So.
I mean, it solves a problem, but I'm sure we will be discussing this over and over again, like how other ways it's going to help us, or maybe put us in a situation of a bind of some sort. We're going to be in a pickle with technology as well. Who knows? And I think before we finish and open up for the questions, I think I have to ask you this, because we live in this influencer culture. When you guys probably started your marketing careers, that was beginning, or maybe like even at the very beginning of the influencer culture. And like right now, what I saw this week, every event, every activation was full of people that, just regular people with their phones in their hands and then, doing content. Athletes are amazing influencers. How are you, well, first of all, you have this incredible opportunity to use them to your advantage, because they sell anything they wear, they touch, they talk about. But also, sports teams are influencers in a bigger way. So what are your thoughts about how do you leverage the influence you have with your teams, but also is there anything else that we should be thinking about that we don't, because you guys are already seeing it in terms of influencing audiences?
Yeah, so I can give you one that's just a bit different. So I think having a massive platform, you have to be able to leverage it for more than just sales. You have to do it to be able to change and to stand up for things that are really meaningful. So a couple of months ago, we have a black goalkeeper. A couple of months ago, he was playing against another team, and there was racist chants directed at him. There are no rules against any of this in Italian football, but there's steps that you need to take, which the first step is alert the ref. He did, nothing happened. Heard it again, alerted the ref. The ref paused the game to see if there was anything valid with it, and actually realized there was something valid. So the team actually walked off the field. They're not allowed to do that. Technically, you forfeit the match. You forfeit 3 points by doing that. Thankfully, the league was smart enough and didn't deduct us points, but they could have. And so the following match, we said, we have to use our platform and our influence to drive change. These fans aren't outlawed from the stadiums. In the US, there's blacklists. You're never allowed back in your entire lifetime. So the following match, our following home match, we essentially set up on the 16th minute, which is Mike Mignon's number. We paused play. The league was in on it. Bologna was in on it. And we were in on it. And for 1 minute, we just had it was like a silent message of, if there is no change, there is no game. There's just no room for racism. So we used our platform to try and drive change in the league, to make a statement, to take a stance. It's something that U.S. teams have been doing for a really long time. Yeah. And it's not really common in Italian football. I think the Premier League does a better job. But essentially, it's like this guy got banned for 5 years. They weren't allowed to have fans the next game. And it's something so small, but it's at least it's starting to change and drive some change and progress. So we're pretty proud about that.
Yeah, you
I could talk about the influencers that come and take selfies and all that
I think
stuff.
this is much better to use
but I
your
think that
influence.
one's an interesting, a sad example that we had to leverage our platform for something like that, but a pretty positive outcome.
Totally. And
fantastic story. I think, when we talk about influence of a brand, I actually think more to my experience at Austin FC. And, for the club, the mission of the club was to always be a flag bearer for Austin and really try and transcend, global football alone. And, and being a flag bearer for Austin, we consistently found opportunities to use our platform and our reach to lift up the parts of Austin that make this city special, right? Mm-hmm. So whether it's artists, musicians, muralists, all of this sort of stuff, making them part of our story. And it was a give and take. Like I said, so often sports teams they're going straight to how many followers does this person have? What can this person do for us? And nobody's asking the question of this has to be reciprocal. And by making it reciprocal, you can still say something about your brand and who you are, rather than the take. And also, scale does not mean that it's going to be received well, right? Sure. There's a bunch of instances where the celeb maybe got a special opportunity or something like that, and fans are piping up saying, 1, I don't care, and 2, this kind of feels icky, right? I don't really like this. So I think there's a huge amount of room for brands to maybe think about the whole idea of influencers and really making sure that it's reciprocal and understanding that they have a platform, much like you guys did. That's a fantastic example of using influence, and it can run it in a bunch of different ways outside of just the selfie and the jersey swap and all of that sort of stuff, right?
And I was walking around at Q2 with Tania, and if you ever go to a stadium and walk around with a marketing executive, you have a totally different perspective on everything that was done inside a stadium, because she was telling me, look how well they use the color here, and I love that. And suddenly, I've been to thousands of stadiums or hundreds of stadiums, and I was never paying attention to everything she mentioned, and I can tell that literally what you've done at FC Austin and everything about that stadium felt like it was a community and not only a team. So the whole branding and the marketing strategy, I think, is visibly successful for an outsider who's visiting, right? We were mesmerized with everything, especially the family culture you have.
Well, and I think Austin FC benefits from having a fantastic ownership group and a fantastic leadership team that believes in the idea of this team, of Austin FC being a community asset and supporting Austin in any way it can. So that stuff really comes from the top from that perspective.
Good for them. Thank you. And now let's open it to questions, for your questions to these incredible guests. If anyone wants to take the microphone, it's in the middle. Come over and...
Yeah, don't be shy. Don't make me talk about Barbie if we don't get any
we
questions.
didn't get to talk about Barbie.
No, we don't need to talk about Barbie. I'd rather answer questions, but...
No Barbie connection with a pink top. I'm just going to put that in there. James, you quite smartly sidestepped a question about the connection with United, which kind of led me to want to ask, how does the global negativity of a bad owner impact on your brand and potential growth strategy?
Oof.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think I won't comment on the bad owner piece, right? Obviously, there's commentary. I think the Glazers have been extremely progressive in terms of, how they look at their business. And, I've seen that and experienced it firsthand at the Buccaneers. They're smart, they're progressive, they're ambitious. And I think their focus on Germany as an opportunity for American football, it really points to them being quite savvy about how they're thinking about expansion, given all the opportunity that exists in Germany. The fact that there is already a hugely acculturated fan base there, and there's so much room to grow in terms of just the pace for that sport.
And I know Milan had a history, obviously, the previous owner was not wholly loved, but it's just how you, as a PR thing, the negativity, how you go about kind of fronting that or planning against it if you can.
Yeah, so the previous owners to Redbird Capital Partners or Elliott Management, and for 4 years completely turned around the club from bankruptcy to close to profitable. So I think they were a pretty good ownership group in terms of support and turning the club around. I mean, they're clearly, like, my experience has been that, and I can only speak to Italian media tends to be quite negative and pick up on just about any possible story, whereas in the US, there isn't as much negativity, and it's like honest reporting to some extent. How it affects the brand, I mean, clearly, it just depends on, I think, who's reading it. I don't know that it directly affects valuations or anything like that. That's not my area of expertise. But from a brand perspective, having stories of things like, opening junior camps. We announced one last week here in Austin, and having junior camps across 23 cities. It's like, it depends. When you read about the ownership group or you read about how we're giving back to communities, I think it depends on the reader and their perception. But thankfully, for several years, we've had fantastic ownership.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thank you. And please speak to the microphone, so perhaps, if you can.
Hi there. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about localizing content for your non-home market. What does that process look like? Do you have teams in those local markets, or are you working with other people? Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I could speak to it from the Bucs side. We have people on the ground, agency help to support our messaging in Germany. I think a big thing as we go full bore into the marketplace is how do we make sure that we have a unique voice that is specific to the Bucs. I think, so often when sports teams try and go international, they tend to lose their voice because they're so focused on trying to speak to the particular market. And then everybody else that's in that market is trying to do the same thing, and then it sounds very same. And I think that was very much an issue here in North America when international football teams, global football teams would come here. They all had the same voice, they all had the same tone, and they weren't creating unique conversations with their fans, so they weren't creating any sort of hook. You're a fan of a team because it has a particular thing about it. It connects with you in a unique way. And obviously, content's going to be one of your foremost avenues to do that when you're thinking about international. So the conversations we're having with our German counterparts is, okay, how do we express the Buccaneers' identity in a way that will resonate with the German audience, which is different than how do we just grow football in Germany? That's going to lead you to two different pathways, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, languages, we leverage agencies for that. So we have, we have content in Arabic, and I think 15 different languages were applicable. But yeah, I think James nailed it there.
Thank you.
I think a lot of teams have like now Mandarin, Cantonese, Arabic as like the primary languages that they create content specifically in those languages, and in addition to.
Hi, first of all, I'm a huge fan of AC Milan. Actually, I went to
Milan.
San Siro like a couple of years ago, and it was one of the greatest experiences I ever had in my life. You have a huge fan base, and I think that's part of the mystique and the power of the team. And I was wondering how, when you're like this team, AC Milan, with all this background and all these championships won and the whole names of players that have been around and it's going to be being around, how do you compare that to women's soccer? Because it's like really important, like the presence of women on sports right now, and to get to the next level, maybe not pairing it because it's like a path to walk, but how do you see the women's team in, like, I don't know, 5 years?
So AC Milan actually has a women's team. We've been pro, Alessandro, keep me honest, 3 years now? About 3 years. It's nowhere near as advanced as, let's say, Spain or England or the rest of the world, but it's growing, and it's a bit more of a family-friendly environment compared, since you've been to San Siro and have seen our ultras. So it's so difficult. You can't really compare. It's amazing that we're able to start a team and help to build the brand in that terms, but like a club with such rich history and legends, we don't have that yet. But the way that we're treating sort of our women's side isn't just about the pitch. So we have the most famous football player from Afghanistan. Her dad was killed in the Taliban. She's the captain of the Danish team. And so we're trying to use our platforms to help tell her story. We have the captain of Sweden on our team, who won bronze at the recent World Cup. So we're trying to tell the story and also use that platform for good. So I think there's a couple of programs that we're going to announce here in the next month that is helping progress women's football and just women's rights in Italy. But yeah, it's a bit difficult to compare. I'm inspired by what is happening with women's football around the world, and hope to bring that to Italy as well.
Right. Thanks.
Hi, I think it's a nice segue. I have actually a question more broadly. How do you capture your female audiences? Do you have specific strategies that are directed at female audience, but also twofold? Do you have, is it on your radar in terms of stadium experience? Are you doing anything specifically, or maybe you're foreseeing in the future that will specifically capture how women spend money, how women enjoy their time? As we've historically obviously known that stadium experience is made for men, and how they like to spend their time and how they like to spend their money. So I'll be really interested to hear your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys have read in the news, we are looking for a new stadium. San Siro is an incredible, giant piece of concrete. I mean, just from something as simple as bathrooms in the terzo anello, the third ring, it's like non-existent. We have 4 kitchens. We have, for a stadium with 75,000 fan capacity, it's iconic. But from a stadium experience perspective, I mean, you have a family that comes and you have a little kid that's waiting and queuing to use the restroom for an entire half. That's like a terrible experience, and just from an infrastructure perspective, it would cost a ton of money, and some stuff is just not possible with the amount of concrete that San Siro has. So that's a big reason why we want a new stadium, is so that we can think about the experience, and we can just genuinely, I mean, you've been to San Siro, so when you get there, so many people have an amazing experience because it's so intimidating. Like, it's really intimidating, it's intense, it's dark at times, there's like chants, but it's incredible. Something like that doesn't exist, let's say, in the US yet, although Austin FC fan base, I think will get there pretty quickly. So that's honestly, it's one of our biggest goals with this new stadium.
Yeah, it's a huge focus for the Buccaneers. I would say it's our singular biggest audience focus, because we have the most amount of opportunity to grow there. And I think this is a focus for the league as well. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen and that we are trying to push is, it's as simple as showing and celebrating the female fan base that we already have. I think so often sports teams get so focused on only telling stories about what's happening on the pitch, and it becomes so hard for fans from different communities to see themselves in that brand. And I think trying to turn the lens around and tell more stories about our fans, and not even stories, just featuring them in our content, featuring them in our campaigns and all of that sort of stuff. We did a lot of brand work when I first got to the Bucs, and one of the things that we saw, which was not unique to the Bucs, but particularly for women, they were less likely to say that we see ourselves in your brand. That's a huge, hey, we've got to wrestle this to the ground sort of moment. And it makes sense. It's football, it's aggro, it's a bunch of big guys running into each other. But that doesn't mean that your brand can't represent women or any other different community that exists in town and throughout the world. So that's been a big point of focus for us, is really making sure that on our content channels, on social, all this sort of stuff, that we're featuring and celebrating our female fans, maybe like we haven't done before, because we haven't been doing it of fans generally, right? It's not even just specific to women, but focusing on fans gives us that conduit to elevate and give a better pedestal to the fan bases and the different diversities that we have within our fan base.
I have a question for all of you. So I'm a basketball fan too, and on the All-Star game was the biggest thing in the All-Star game was Sabrina and Curry going head to head. And my question is, and not only a question, it's more like, how can we make the sport better by crossing them, like what they did, that I don't think they even understood what they were doing. But when they crossed Sabrina with Curry, all of a sudden, my son was more into the women's sports and looking more at all of these other fantastic athletes, women. And so what can we do, or what can you guys do to make that cross that NBA did? And I'm sure soccer could pull it off, and I'm sure football, I don't know how, but that's why you guys are here.
Yeah,
and I'm just asking that, I'm throwing it on there.
That sounds more like a challenge to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a question.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Let's go. It's a really interesting question. I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
It was like a cultural moment. To your point, I don't think that the NBA
they didn't realize.
They probably understood, but they didn't realize how big of a cultural moment that was going to become. And Nike helped fan that fire as well. But I think it would be tremendous for us to do the same.
You actually mentioned it. Flag is such a huge opportunity for the NFL and for the Bucs. I mean, it's such a great thing, because now it gives young female athletes a real association and pathway within the game, which is hugely important. And the Buccaneers have been focusing on flag for a few years now. We actually run the largest high school girls flag football tournament in the world. We have 109 different teams that participate in Tampa Bay. And I'll tell you, seeing those games, seeing those girls play, seeing how intense they are, Like, it's a really, really fun thing to see. And we've actually made a choice, whereas a couple years we kind of covered it more from a community impact CSR perspective. And this year we really kind of changed the brand over and said, listen, this is about badass girls playing football, and not necessarily about a community give back, but really giving these girls a pathway, because now flag football is going to be in the Olympics in 28. College programs are now providing scholarships for flags. So great, we want to be part of that pathway for them. And I think it's so important in terms of how we're presenting their experience and making sure that it feels intense and has all those elements that you love from the traditional game translated for girls flag.
Thank
You
you.
know who was here yesterday? Diana Flores.
Oh, really?
She was at our podcast stage. It was
Oh, right
amazing
on.
to meet her.
Yeah.
And like, she's such a superpower.
Super
Like, when
impressive.
for me, like, Super Bowl was all about her commercial.
Yeah,
I think.
100%.
How's it going? I know it's true in the U.S., but as the consumption is changing of sports with the younger generations, Gen Z, what are steps that you guys are taking to like future-proof the brand for the younger generation?
Yeah, I think for us, it's meeting them where they already are, where they're spending time, areas that they trust. So like the Rocket League example is showing up in places that are a bit unexpected, but that we do have an authentic connection. So who would have thought that AC Milan would ever be a race car? But we did it in an authentic way, being in the platforms they're on, and honestly, making sure that we pay attention to what is important to them, like sustainability, like equality, and being able to challenge ourselves to say, are we a brand that has values that will withstand the test of time? And how do we continue to evolve our brand as well so that we are future-proof?
Yeah, very similar for us. I think especially with young audiences, they expect more from their brands, and that's true within sport. We can't just go out and be the best darn football team we can and just have that be the extent of our brand. We need to build a brand that, especially for young audiences, we stand for something. Whether it's, sustainability, how we're giving back to the community, that's an expectation in particular for young fans. So we've done a lot of work in terms of how are we evolving the Buccaneers brand to live outside of just football alone and really stand for representing Tampa Bay, but also representing a sort of Buccaneers identity and building equity in that. And that's not something that we're going to be able to, really get off the ground in 6 months, but it's a multi-year plan that we're starting now to really build that identity. And we think that's going to make us that much more compelling, not only for young fans, but for all fans, because we'll have a brand with more depth. But for young fans that didn't grow up with their dad running or watching football, or the grandfather didn't watch football, we need to be able to create that sort of brand to be able to have a chance to make sure that they're Buccaneers fans in the future.
Thanks for this session. With MLS being, or soccer in general, being just so much more visible in the U.S. now with Ted Lasso, with Wrexham, those kinds of things, especially with Wrexham in the second season, you talked about a little bit the focus on the fans.
Yep.
They totally shifted from we're hyping our team, we're talking about the town, we're talking about our competitors, we're talking about our women's league. Do you guys see that as a real opportunity now for you to shift your perspectives? They kind of kicked open a different door to tell stories in a different way?
100%. And I think the first ones to really do it was Sunderland with Sunderland Till I Die. It was the first documentary series that said, okay, yes, it's about football, but it's also about football's impact on the town and the people that live this brand day and night. And it's hard not to be a Sunderland fan after watching those people and what they went through, right? And how committed they are. And I think that's not just a one-off. That is the expectation of sport going forward. And I think we ask ourselves a lot now, how do we tell those deeper stories? And because all it does is it helps identify this fact that this is not just about the 11 guys throwing a funny shaped ball around on a field, right? It's about this community connection and getting back to the core of why sport exists. Why does sport exist? It exists so that we can experience this sort of healthy tribalism, right? And that tribalism is so much more authentic when you're seeing all the components of it beyond just what's happening on the field. And that's what Wrexham's done so well. That's what Sunderland's done so well. And I think it's probably for both of us something that, as CMOs, we're envisioning to build around our brand so that we can bring more people into fandom for our teams, right?
I think it also helps protect you when you don't win.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, there's nothing that I can do to help my team win on the pitch. But if I can tell those stories of our community, of our fan base, of the history in an interesting new way, and like what is so special about it, it helps kind of protect you to some extent from continuously having to only focus on wins and losses.
I can't agree with that anymore. I couldn't agree with that anymore. Like I said, it's the singular thing that we as marketers probably run into most often is if we just win, all the problems will go away. And it's like, well, that's fantastic, but winning, is not a sustainable strategy, as funny as that might sound. It's the one thing you cannot guarantee. So you need to build a strategy that can take you through the peaks and valleys. And so I find myself advocating a lot on, okay, if we don't win, if our season doesn't look like the way we want it to, what are we going to be facing? And how are we building a brand that can sustain beyond that, right?
I mean, look at the Buffalo Bills. Like, they didn't win for like
exactly.
20, but they have a super strong fan base because...
I've lived in Minnesota for a long time, and the long-suffering Vikings and the same thing. So thank you for that.
Right, thank you.
Thank you
Wow.
guys.
Thank you both for this amazing panel. I think thank you for coming and listening to us. And
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
If you have other questions, I
will
can't
be-
speak to James, but feel free to reach out via LinkedIn. We're here to learn from each other, help each other, and thank you so much
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
coming.
Reach out. Thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you.